In today's case, we're looking at one of the worst kinds of predator. This man not only preyed on the relatively young, but also those who were the worse for wear after a night of drinking. By specifically targeting this group, he was able to pick off the weaker members of the herd. As a society, we often want to think the best of others, and when drunk, you're usually more willing to accept the word of someone who says that they want to help you. For a young woman just 20 years of age who was having trouble finding a taxi, a man swooped in like a knight in shining armour to rescue her. But he was really a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he just wanted to get her away from the busy roadside and to somewhere she would find it harder to stop him doing whatever he wanted to do. This is the tragic case of India Chipchase, and this is Murder of Crows. Northampton is a large town in the Midlands of England in the UK. Evidence of a settlement in the area dates back to Anglo-Saxon times, but it was in the medieval years that the town first became significant, with the establishment of Northampton Castle. It was an occasional royal residence which regularly hosted the Parliament of England. It was granted a town charter by Richard I in 1189, and a mayor was appointed by King John in 1215. The Great Fire of Northampton, not to be confused with the one in London, the Great Fire of Northampton in 1675 also destroyed much of the historic town. Northampton was soon rebuilt, and it grew rapidly with the industrial development of the 18th century. And the town continued to expand with the arrival of the Grand Union Canal and the railways in the 19th century, and it became a national centre for footwear and leather manufacture. And it's this reason that the town's football team are known as the Cobblers. Northampton unsuccessfully applied for city status 4 times, the most recent one coming in 2022. And even though it remains officially a town, its population was given as being just shy of 250,000 in 2021. The overall crime rate in Northamptonshire as of June 2024 is 76 crimes per 1,000 people. And the most common crimes are violence and sexual offences. But for the purposes of our story, Northampton was the home to a young lady named India Chipchase in 2016. India Chipchase was born to Sue Pointer and Jeremy Chipchase on Christmas Eve 1995, and she was cherished by her family. Having a birthday so close to Christmas could have made her hate the festive period, but India went the other way with it, and she absolutely adored it. And she would go out of her way to make Christmas special for everyone around her. As the firstborn child of her mother, she shared a special bond with her mum. And as she grew up, she cared deeply about other people. And she always tried to improve the lives of others. As she entered her 20s and went into the year 2016, she had finally decided what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to be a paramedic, perhaps inspired by her dad, Jeremy, who is a doctor. But her mother was convinced she would be successful, given how much she cared for others. At the end of January 2016, India was a few weeks into a new relationship with a man called Grant Hare. Her first relationship since splitting from professional rugby player New Zealander Evan Rehana, son of All Black winger Bruce Rehana. India was making a fresh start, but was looking to let off steam on a night out with friends on the 29th of January 2016, as her boyfriend Grant was going out with his friends the same night. And with the night progressing well, India, her friend Alice Lewis, and other friends in the group were seen entering NB's cocktail bar and club in Bridge Street, Northampton. Judging by her behaviour on the evening out, it would be fair to say that India was on a mission in terms of alcohol consumption. Between 11:30 p.m. and 12:15 a.m., some 45 minutes, India had 6 Jaeger bombs. And in fairness, I would have been trolleyed after 4. But it seems that it had a similar effect on the diminutive young lady, as by 12:40, she was seen on CCTV slumped on a bar before dropping her handbag. At this point, she seems to have become separated from her friends. And when Alice Lewis tried to find India in the bar at around 12:45, she was unable to find her. Whatever the reason for the girls not finding each other, India, clearly the worse for wear, leaves the bar and seems quite tearful when she tells doorman Dave Burry that she just wants to go home, and Dave hails a taxi for India. But this is where a disagreement happens. Once inside the taxi, the driver takes one look at India's heavily inebriated state and asks for the fare in advance. Now, whether India did not have the cash on her, or whether she just disagreed with his being a judgy bastard, either way, she left the taxi and decided to try to find another. But it was a sign of India's state at this time that she tried to pull open a locked car door, thinking that it was a taxi. At this point, India was swaying and disoriented, as well as becoming distraught by her inability to find a ride home. At this point, which would have been around 1:15 a.m, CCTV captures her being approached by a man. At around 1:30 a.m, India makes the final attempt of several to call her boyfriend, Grant. After this, she sends some seemingly nonsensical Snapchats before going radio silent. Now, Grant doesn't notice the missed calls from India until he puts his lifeless phone on charge at around 3 a.m. But when he tries to call her back, he gets no answer. He assumed that she must be asleep by now, so thought that he would just catch up with her after they'd both slept off some of the alcohol. But he never heard from India again. Given that India would often stay at friends' homes, especially after nights out, it took some time for anyone to realise that India was missing. India worked as a bartender at a local pub and restaurant called the Calling Tree. Now, this was just a temporary job until her paramedic training position started. But despite that, she was still very punctual and very professional. She was not somebody who would skip work without letting people know, and she had no records of any misconduct at this job. So when India missed her shift at around 4:30 p.m. on the 30th of January, people were immediately concerned. India's boss tried calling her several times, but she never answered. And he instinctively knew that something was wrong. So he informed her parents. And India's parents, feeling similarly, immediately filed a police complaint. They knew that India wouldn't stay quiet for this long. She didn't answer calls, reply to messages, or post anything on social media. The police started questioning people, and her parents posted her picture on social media asking for any information. And that was when they got to know about her night at the bar, and following that, about the disturbing CCTV footage. When police saw it, they identified the man that was last seen with her and they knew India would have been in danger. The police identified the man as 52-year-old Edward Tenniswood. This man was known to be somewhat eccentric and odd, and that's me being diplomatic. He had very few relationships of note and absolutely no known close relationships. On January the 31st, 2016, the police tracked India's phone records to Edward's home on Stanley Road. And when they reached the house, they found a disturbing scene. They knew that Edward suffered from obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. He washed his hands multiple times and almost always wore latex gloves. But even with this in mind, they were not prepared for the combination of order and chaos that met them when they entered his home. Everything in his flat, including the shelves, tables and computer, were neatly wrapped in plastic. But as a counterpoint to this, he also had newspapers scattered across the floor. The officers found photographs of women, including former model Heather Stewart-White, in the kitchen, and the number of photos of the model suggested some sort of obsession with her. But in between all the plastic wrappers and the newspapers and the photographs, the police found the lifeless body of India Chipchase. The autopsy report revealed that India died from blunt force trauma to the head, as well as asphyxiation. The pathologist found several bruises and cuts on her neck, face, and other parts of her body. And taken together, they pointed to an inflicted injury as opposed to an accidental one. The doctor found Edward's blood in India's fingernails, hinting that India fought him because she was unquestionably a warrior. Edward also had scratch marks on his neck and forearms, which went to prove this point. India's tox report revealed that she had 3 times more alcohol in her system than the legal driving limit. Since Edward had OCD, he wore latex gloves. And the police claimed that after killing India, he wore his gloves to dress her up and set the crime scene before he ultimately left his home. But for any of this information to be of any use in building a case against Tenniswood, they needed to find him first. The police learned that Edward had checked into the nearby Ibis Hotel. CCTV footage showed Tenniswood entering the Ibis Hotel in Mayfair, Northampton, after going for a kebab to clear his head. And when they knocked on his door at the hotel, they found him watching TV and relaxing with a beer. Yeah, you chill out, Tenniswood. But far from being shocked or afraid, he just seemed mildly surprised with him saying, "It didn't take you long to find me." During the police interview, somewhat unsurprisingly as we know this type of character, Tenniswood tried to play down the death of India and claimed that it was a tragic accident. Apparently, when he saw India outside the bar, the two of them had an instant connection. He promised her he'd drop her home safely, but only after a drink at his place. So Edward took India to his place, and the two of them had just the most incredible time. They drank, chatted, and joked around merrily. And at some point, things got saucy, and the two of them had a consensual sexual encounter. Really, Tenniswood, really? Edward claimed India wanted to spice things up, and she put his hand to her neck and urged him to give her a slight squeeze. But Edward accidentally constricted her too much, and she died of strangulation. He insisted that he did not know the pressure was too much. When India stopped responding, Edward assumed she had fallen asleep, since both he and India were heavily drunk. However, in the morning, when Edward woke up, he noticed the motionless body of India, yet he imagined that she was in a diabetic coma or was still drunk and unconscious. Because, of course he did. Of course he hadn't callously attacked and murdered her. But the police weren't having any of it. They held on to their view that Edward lured India, sexually assaulted her, and killed her. Therefore, they charged him with the first-degree murder of India Chipchase. And the trial came to court in July of 2016. And the bizarre behaviour that Tenniswood's acquaintances had seen in him in the past did not end when the case came to trial at Birmingham Crown Court. In fact, he seemed quite excited. Even after the judge repeatedly asked him to answer in short sentences, Edward narrated his story in inappropriate detail. And he even asked for a dummy so that he could reenact the scene. At one point, the narration was so explicit that the jurors were actually asked to leave the room. And understandably, India's family was visibly upset by his description and behaviour. He acted as though he was simply reciting a story, as opposed to the very real death of a much-loved daughter, sister, and friend. The prosecution introduced two witnesses who had suffered violence at the hands of Edward Tenniswood. The first of these was Edward's former neighbour, who claimed that Edward was short-tempered and vicious. He told the court that Edward had PTSD from his time in the army. And importantly, he also recalled when Edward tried to choke him for not spending time with him. As you do. Second witness was a woman who went on a date with Edward many years before, and she described him as a twisted man. They apparently had an argument, and Edward was beyond angry. He pushed her against the wall and mishandled her. And he also tried to kiss her while choking her. Yeah, you know what I was going to say. The trial went on for 2 weeks, but in the end the jury took only about 2 hours to declare Edward Tenniswood guilty of the rape and murder of India Chipchase. Following the verdict, an impact statement from India Chipchase's mum Sue was read, which in part said, "She was such a huge part of our lives. For the sake of her siblings, we must try to enjoy it, but it will never be the same again. India was very much a home bird, always flying back home. Her brothers and sisters were very important to her. She was loving, kind, and beautiful inside and out. India was such a vibrant person, and our house was noisy and chaotic, and there was never a dull moment when she was around. Her death has left such a huge void in our lives. Her siblings are quiet and subdued without her. She was also incredibly close to her grandmother, who has been devastated by this. She was also close to her aunt and uncles, who have all struggled to come to terms with her death. I'm realistic enough to know we have to look forward to the future without India for the sake of our other children. Life will never be the same, but we have to try." India's dad, Jeremy, also released a video statement.
"I have been given the victim personal statement leaflet and the scheme has been explained to me. What follows is what I wish to say in connection with this matter. I understand that what I may say may be used in various ways and it may be disclosed to the defence. I am Jeremy Chipchase, father to India and her 3 siblings, Harry, Lulu and Pia. For 20 years, myself and her mother Sue loved India. We love her now and we will always love her. Even though we will never experience her smile, her laughter, her caring again, her photographs will adorn our walls, the memories of her 20 years will live on, and her spirit will always be in our hearts. Whatever happened that night, whatever stories are told, the fact is my daughter was murdered. I sincerely hope that there is no possibility that any other woman ever suffers at the hands of my daughter's murderer. Speaking from a father's perspective, I do not want any other father to hear that their daughter has gone missing like I did, and then for them to hear she's been found dead. No other father will therefore have to see the devastation that I have seen in Sue, Harry and Pia and Lulu's faces. No other father will have to see their daughter's body in the mortuary and be told they are unable to touch her or kiss her one last time. No other father will have to carry her coffin into a church with his son, and no other father will have to see her mother and siblings grief at the church service. No other father will have to touch the coffin and say, "Love you, Ind," and then see the curtain close at a crematorium. And no other father will be hit with a wave of emotion at a wedding, as I was, on realising that I would never walk injured down the aisle. I'm sure that I and other family members will continue to have moments like this of pain, anguish, emotion until we take a last breath. I therefore reiterate, I do not want there to be other victims at hands of India's murderer, and therefore no other families to experience what we have. I hope that the sentencing reflects this.
The judge sentenced Edwards to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years in prison before he could apply for parole. He found Edwards' actions despicable and a crime of utter depravity. Following the sentencing of Tenniswood, Northamptonshire Police released a statement from India's family, and this said, "We would like to thank a number of people and organisations for their help and support during what has been an extraordinarily traumatic experience. Firstly, we cannot thank Northamptonshire Police enough for the speed of response and for the professionalism shown by everyone at the force throughout the investigation, not least by how quickly India was found and the suspect arrested. The police's guidance and support has been outstanding. India's friends have also been a bedrock of support for us. India had a wide group of friends, both at work and in her leisure time, and everyone has gone out of their way to help us. Nothing has been too much trouble, and the strong feelings that India's friends had for her have given us plenty of comfort and inner strength at this time. We would also like to thank Northampton's community for their positive attitude and respect towards us. This has been a high-profile case, with coverage across the world. But our fellow townspeople have respected our privacy and given us the space to grieve as a family and with our friends. We cannot tell you how important this has been to us as a group, and cannot thank you enough. Northampton's business community has also been very supportive. From publicising the initial search to the aftermath of her death. We are still only part way through this grieving process, and we are grateful that justice has been done. And that was the harrowing and tragic case of India Chipchase, who only went out with her friends and got pissed, as thousands upon thousands do every weekend all across the UK. But for her, it would be the last night of her life, after a predator singled her out, then took advantage of her vulnerable state to make sure he could do just what he wanted to do. He was a sadistic bastard and unquestionably a cockwomble. India Chipchase was a beautiful young woman, inside and out. She brightened up every room and had incredible potential, and would definitely have been a force for good in the world. Her light was snuffed out far, far too soon, and I send love to the friends and family that are still navigating the grieving process after her untimely death. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Please subscribe if you haven't yet to keep up to date with all of mine and Samson's shenanigans. But with that said, I'm Steve. This orange lummox is Samson. And we will see you when we see you.
Say that you're ready, but you won't like it, you say